Rob, you know the old saying, right? Every adversity has a treasured opportunity. The treasured opportunity we have is the adversity we're facing.
Yep.
Whether it is national, whether it is local, whether it is man-made or nature-made, has an opportunity. If we'd only be able to see between the spaces.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back. Or maybe it's your first time with us. Welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, the weekly show where you know that I get to, not have to, I get the privilege to have weekly conversations with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers, I call them, across all sectors and segments of society and industry, as we come together to really try and do two things. One, to navigate this complicated, complex world that we live in a little bit better, and ideally to leave this world a little bit better than we found it. Today, we are so excited. I'm grateful to be joined by Rohit Shukla, who is the founder and CEO of the LARTA Institute here in Los Angeles. And LARTA has a bunch of parts and pieces to it. We're going to unpack all of that today. But first, let me tell you a little bit about him before we welcome him to the show. He is, in my humble opinion, a truly globally recognized expert, a speaker, an ecosystem architect, dedicated to fundamentally the commercialization of deep technology, but then also tangentially just to the development of the communities that he participates in, those being virtual or literal communities. He's one of those rare leaders across business and society who can say that his work speaks for itself and really mean it. For over 3 decades, he has served as the founder and CEO of LARTA Institute, which I mentioned, which is a mission-driven organization focused on transforming cutting-edge scientific ideas into enterprises that feed the world, fuel the world, and heal the world. He studied a variety of social sciences at Cambridge and Loyola Marymount here. He's a master communicator and a leader who sees around the corners that are facing us in the world. He specializes in guiding publicly funded R&D through these messy transitional periods into viable commercial businesses. And over the course of his long career, he's designed regional and global commercialization initiatives in partnership with the state of California. He's provided policy advice to former U.S. presidential administrations. And as we were just talking offline before we got started today, to local mayoral administrations here in Los Angeles. He's interacted with massive federal agencies, and he's built an extraordinary world-class network of domain experts, investors, and enterprise buyers and decision makers. Through a lot of this, his day-to-day is really deep in the weeds of kind of new science, innovation, and entrepreneurship. But while doing that, he's one of my favorite kind of people. He's really driven by human-centered design. And he encourages us all really to focus more on outcomes and community resilience and practical deployment over mere ideation. Here in Los Angeles, everybody that will listen to this and enjoy this episode in the coming weeks knows that he is truly one of our OG kind of elder statesmen of entrepreneurial thinking, in my humble opinion. And that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation with him today. Rohit, welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Rob. I really appreciate you hosting. Thank you.
My pleasure. And just as a nod to what's possible in the world beyond our car-infested, traffic-congested Los Angeles, I will let our guests, our audience today know that Rohit literally came from San Diego up on the train, which then takes you to Union Station, which, by the way, if you're a World Cup soccer fan, Union Station has been transformed this week to serve as one of FIFA's fan fests, which is awesome. And then at Union Station, transferred from one mode of public transit to the other and took the D-Line subway out to his home where he is now with us. So if he isn't a testament to what is possible, right, in the region, and that we can transverse this massive place called Southern California that we all love, by just leveraging public transportation and then maybe even investing in more public transportation in more ways to enable people to have greater choice. Like today is a perfect testament to it. And now here he is with me using all this technology to try and have a conversation with you all that we hope enlightens and maybe inspires some folks. So thank you again for hanging out with me for a little bit.
Thank you, Rob. And by the way, let me just say I was really impressed. I impressed myself by the ease with which I was able to navigate what would otherwise seem like an impossible dream to live in, as you said, a car-infested culture, but
Yeah.
one that is actually starting to recognize the importance of connection of the various parts of the city, so you can actually
Yeah.
get around
No,
much more
very,
quickly than you did before, right?
very, very true. And again, I mean, it's a Thursday, so it might not have been so bad, but that traffic from San Diego north to Orange County through Orange County into LA at this time of day, you'd still be in your car.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
I've
say,
become a fan. I have become a fan,
yes.
and I think I'm going to, because I work downtown, our offices are downtown, I'm going to start taking the train.
Attaboy.
Frankly,
There we go.
Yeah.
That's what we like to hear. Yeah. All right. So we've got a lot to talk about. Here's kind of where I want us to start though, right? In a world, help us understand, kind of frame things, right? In a world to me that seems so, my words, desperate for innovative or fresh new thinking on maybe almost every level presently, and is looking for new solutions. To me, and this is almost maybe an unfair question to start with, because I'm going to ask you to kind of help us narrow it down or maybe highlight the area. But what would be the one most critical area for us all to focus on if we were trying to focus where we could laser point all of our entrepreneurial thinking in this complicated, messy world that we live in right now? And it doesn't have to be hard science, your answer. It could be policy. It could be culture. But if there is an area that rises above it all right now, where should we get started?
I think personally that, first of all, not just personally, but this has been the mission of the organization for all of the 33 years it's been around, and more importantly, in the last 10 years in particular, very focused on resilience. I think as a species, as a city, as a country, as a group of people who are focused on being able to better lives across the world, and this is not just an empty promise, you've got to be able to focus on how can we be resilient in a time of considerable challenge? Because you've got remarkable challenges with weather and climate. You've got remarkable challenges with food. And I'm not talking about the production of food. I'm talking about the accessibility of food, of good, nutritious, clean food, of water. And we know all about that in Los Angeles, which is, basically should never have been the kind of city it is.
Right.
It's scrubland, and, here we are with this extraordinary metropolis. So we can figure out these things here. I think we've taught the world a huge lesson. Yeah. It is an urban lab. And that's why we're focused so much in LA now, while being aware of and engaged in the world as it is. And I think that's the biggest challenge right now, and the biggest opportunity. How do you
resilience across, as I would say in the show intro, like across every sector and segment of society and industry.
Absolutely. And I think the corollary of that, Rob, is the fact that unfortunately we've developed systems that have become stymied by their own power and by their own existence and by the weight of their own work. Right. And I think what has happened as a consequence is you become highly siloized, right? So you can't think across sectors. You cannot think across all of the various challenges, and how do you actually access them? And you know what? The best kinds of people to work with are entrepreneurs.
100%.
Because they are not just committed. I mean, you ask any entrepreneur, right? I mean, yes, of course, you've got the folks who say, I just want to build $1 billion company and get acquired by whoever. But you ask most of them, and I can tell you right now, they are using their position, their work for purpose.
Sure.
It's purpose driven, and it always is. And we've discovered that more and more in the last 10 years, I would say. With all of the stuff that you've talked about, what we've done over the last 30 years, 33 years now, this has been the final kind of a realization that, entrepreneurial zeal and entrepreneurial mission orientation is the best way to be able to get behind and under and into the kind of work that requires us to be increasingly resilient.
You are both intentionally, I'm sure, and also unintentionally making the case for the very thesis of this podcast, right? Which is this idea that after spending most of the last 20 years, including my own tenure in my own projects, but mostly with others, with, like, as I always say in the show setup, kind of entrepreneurs and investors, what I came to realize both about my own curiosities and my interests, but then I also started to extrapolate and believe that what I'm about to say was broadly applicable to the world was we don't only need, or we don't just need more entrepreneurs and investors. What we need is truly, in my humble opinion, this new, my phrase, this entrepreneurial thinker across every sector and segment of society.
You're so right about that, Rob.
I want entrepreneur. I mean, we have a lot of things going on in LA right now. Like, I want a mayor or a city council person who is an entrepreneurial thinker. I want researchers that are working with, our friend Andy Wilson down at USC. I want those people to be entrepreneurial thinkers. I want emergency room physicians to be entrepreneurial thinkers. I want professors at UCLA, where my niece is about to start in the fall, to be entrepreneurial thinking academics, right? I want university presidents to, I think we're begging for an era of 50 years of entrepreneurial thinking from the top down in every direction.
Absolutely.
And to me, it wasn't just enough to just keep using the old word, which we're going to use a lot today, of innovation, right? Or innovators. Because again, industry silos and institutions have diminished those words, or we've just worn them out in a way that they don't mean what they actually mean in the dictionary anymore.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the argument that, for example, innovation belongs on the tip of every public official,
right,
and every industry titan is old hat, frankly.
Right, exactly.
And the thing is, innovation is it's like the blind man and the elephant. You just catch onto one part of the elephant and then you can describe it that way. But in fact, it's the whole thing, right? It's a whole way of not just thinking, but getting under the skin of a particular issue or a problem, understanding that, things that, first of all, as you may know very well, Rob, the best entrepreneurs are ones who've dealt with scarcity, right? Who have this notion of, how am I going to make payroll today?
Yeah, literally, or even more dramatically, the book. And I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, which is embarrassing. But I met him. I had the good fortune to meet him in South America. He's from India. He studied and works at Harvard, I think now. His book about innovation called UGAD, right?
Yeah.
And UGAD was this principle of innovation is truly a bottoms up.
Yes, it is.
When it is most effective, it is literally like a bottoms-up dirt floor kind of thing.
Yeah. And what you said was so right. I mean, it's not just about entrepreneurs and investors. It's about the entire ecosystem that we work in all the time, right?
Yep.
Public officials. First of all, one of the big bugbears that I have is, everybody seems to be able to want to gravitate as if it is the holy grail towards venture capital, right?
Of course.
I really respect and admire the role that venture has played in the development of and in the pushing forward of innovative new concepts.
Yep.
Absolutely. 100%. But the fact of the matter is, if you apply Rob's rule, right, which is it should be across the board, everybody should be engaged in that, then you also have to recognize that, people who have considerable means but are not venture capital investors,
right,
have an extraordinary role to play. We live in a city and in a region where there's a considerable amount of wealth that's sitting on the sidelines.
Yes.
And yet you ask any of those folks, and their kids in particular, what kind of world do they want to live in? What kind of imagination could they possibly exercise that will enable them to get into these issues that dominate our lives?
Yep.
And I think you'll find that they would be incredibly motivated.
Sure.
But you got to give them also something, and this is what we're trying to build, right? We're trying to build this cadre of folks who will have the ability to be able to present themselves as being not driven by the entrepreneurial dream, but also vulnerable,
Yep. Yeah.
Also able to see things that otherwise would be off their radar because you've been told by a venture capitalist you've got to do this, this, and this.
In fairness to our venture capital friends, again, who we love and respect for what they do, I just turned 58 this week, right? Venture capital as an industry, as an asset class, and how it gets deployed into the marketplace, its market, is dramatically different in 2026 than it was in 1972 when it was effectively created. right?
Yeah.
Or than it was in the late 1990s or early 1990s, late 1990s, when I was raising my first venture capital. Like that was it's a whole
I
different
know.
thing.
It's financial engineering now, right?
Right. I respectfully say they basically have become what they also used to try to separate them. So they become private equity money managers.
Yeah, and you know what?
Right.
It's extraordinarily important and very, very.
Yep.
The best ones, of course, are the ones who think systemically.
Right.
And I know a few of those folks who really think systemically and understand this. And of course, they're after wealth creation, no question about it.
Yep.
But I also think that there's, between foundations and family offices and
so
corporate
much.
folks, there's so much else that we can be able to bring to the table, right?
Totally agree.
I think
totally agree. All right, let's do this. I usually wait until later in the conversation to have someone talk about their organization, but I want to get it right up front because I want people to understand clearly as we have the rest of the conversation. Talk to us about the LARTA Institute. Like, tell us what that is, why you believe it is so important in today's world, which I think you've already tipped some towards. And then I've got a couple little follow-ups.
Sure. So, first of all, I can't talk about us without going back to the origin story, right?
Please do.
You think about 1993, Los Angeles, the decline, and people have forgotten this. And one of the great attributes of Americans in general, and Californians in particular, is that we forget, right?
Right.
Memory is just memory, and it goes away.
We are blessed and cursed with recency bias.
Absolutely. And so, but I have to remember this every day because it keeps me grounded. And here's what it was, in 1993, the defense industry imploded almost overnight. 800,000 jobs went away in California. 400,000.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney and Company. We all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney and Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney and Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey.
$100,000 of those were in Southern California. Between the San Fernando Valley and all the way down to Orange County, and then San Diego as well. And then in the northern part of the state, because of base closures, the East Bay in particular was decimated. Okay, people have forgotten that completely. There was a film, so it's there in celluloid. There was a film called Falling Down, which was Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas, right? Yeah, that's a classic.
An unemployed aerospace worker out in the South Bay, and he goes nuts on the freeway because he's lost everything. Well, entire communities were decimated, right?
Okay.
So what happened at the time was the Clinton administration came up with this remarkable new way of thinking about the spoils of the defense industry that needed to be redeployed into new, more productive ways of working with our people. And they started this program called TRP. And I knew from the beginning, I was at the time, by the way, the director of aerospace and high technology business at the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation.
Okay.
I had come out of not just a flirtation, but a fairly deep association with defense and aerospace for the group called the President's Roundtable, which was, remarkable individuals. Peter Drucker was one of the folks in the group. Bill Perry, who became Secretary of Defense, and a remarkable man, still alive, still going strong in Stanford. Mal Curry from Hughes, Frank Schrontz from Boeing, all of these great titans, but people with tremendous humanity and a real love for the sciences. And when it came down to Los Angeles, which was ground zero for that industry, it was pretty desperate what was going on, right? So I went to the state and I said, look, there's this TRP program that the Clinton administration has come up with. We're not going to be able to compete very well, but use it as an opportunity to organize ourselves. California is so pioneering, but it never thinks about how it might organize itself without being overly bureaucratic, because we don't like bureaucracy, and we understand that. Okay, so, and the state was broke. It was really broke at the time. And so I said, you don't need a lot of money. What you need is purpose, and you need organizations with purpose and vision, and make them accountable for the outcomes that they are looking to be able to achieve in X number of years. Give it 10 years and do it every year. You have this renewal, and start these organizations not as a beholden to any particular industry, but rather sort of, organizations that were both think tanks, but also provocateurs, who were able to work with entrepreneurs who could understand the power of entrepreneurship emerging from the ashes of this giant industry.
Sure.
Because it was moving to, Nevada and to Arizona and to Alabama and to Georgia. And, of course, everybody forever has wanted to be, has hated on Los Angeles anyway, and
sure.
is hated in California, right? It's the envy story. But anyway, so the state they started a program which went into legislation, which I helped to write, called the Regional Technology Alliance Program.
Okay.
Name came from a specific program that the Clinton administration was putting out at the time by way of a competitive posture.
Gotcha.
California didn't get any of it. So we decided to form our own 3 regional technology alliances, one in the 5-county Los Angeles region, greater LA, one in the Bay Area, and one in San Diego. And San Diego, the reason for San Diego was because they happened to have a governor who was from San Diego.
Okay. Right. Okay.
So, and they were known by the initial of the region that they represented. So San Diego became San Diego Regional Technology Alliance. Los Angeles became LA Regional Technology Alliance, and so on. And that's
okay.
LARTA came in. Okay.
That's
how the name LARTA came in. Fast forward many years, we tried to change the name, and then people said, "Why are you doing that? You're already known as LARTA, so just keep the name." And that's why people say, "Is there a Mr. LARTA? Is there an Uncle LARTA?"
Right, of course. Yes. It does sound like a surname if you don't.
Yeah. So we started, essentially developing a seed fund that the state provided money for, to match any entrepreneur that had a federal award in the sciences.
Gotcha.
Across the board.
Yep.
We did not focus on defense only. We went across the board entirely, including biosciences, including energy, including food, etc. And, I think it went rather well. 10 years is a long time for most policymakers to be able to see results. But the program sunsetted as it was intended to.
Okay.
And then what we did was we said, from that experience was born the recognition that the American taxpayer is incredibly invested in science and technology through research in the universities and through small companies and so on. But there's no one holding them accountable for what happens to those innovations. And honestly, our track record, despite the fact that the world holds us in such esteem, is not that great, frankly.
Right.
Mainly not just because of the kind of innovations that come out, but because of the quality of the things that we've been able to engender in our entrepreneurs.
Yes.
In their thinking about how they make a difference.
Yeah.
And so we started this campaign. We went to the feds and said, look, you've got this program called SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research Program, which is quite well known, by the way, by anyone working in the sciences and universities and even the large companies and defense and everywhere else. They understand SBIR. It's a program that you and I pay for with our tax dollars. It has 2 phases, 2 funded phases. One is a concept phase where you provide an innovative concept, and you provide, a whole dissertation on how this innovation is going to make a difference in a particular field. And it's peer reviewed. This is the way government does it. Obviously, I would do it differently if I was doing it today, but they peer review it. They bring in experts from everywhere and they peer review this. And then you get your phase 1, as they call it, which is, at that time it was like 50,000, 70,000. That time it was a lot of money.
That is, yeah.
Now gone up a lot. But anyway, if you did phase 1, it was for 6 months, and you had the opportunity to show that this concept that you had was going to have some success.
Okay.
And even if you failed, which is something that we were very insistent on, even if you failed, you were able to say, yes, it's failed for these reasons. We understand what they are. We're going to pivot and go in this direction.
Sure.
Which is what you would expect from any entrepreneur.
Sure.
If you got through phase one, you could then apply for phase two, which was also competitive, but a lot more money. And it was either a year and a half or 2 years, depending on the agency, and a lot more money. I'm talking about millions now.
But
okay?
Systemically, if I'm understanding it correctly, not to interrupt you, but I want to tie this together a little bit. So this program, this federal program existed, right?
Yeah.
And in its own world, and entrepreneurs, scientists, inventors were finding their way to it.
Yes.
But then there wasn't this other piece.
Exactly.
There wasn't like this adjacent community or organization or board of people to help either guide them through it or to help them understand where they failing or so it was just kind of like the government was just putting and then some might succeed, some might fail, just kind of almost in a Las Vegas like style.
Correct. And so as long as you,
so your thesis was, hey, what if we become the adjacent organization that helps guide this whole thing?
That's exactly what happened. I mean, I didn't want to just check a box that said, oh, we a part of the legislation was that you have to have commercialization. You just check a box and say, yeah, that's right. They put that in there. No. You have to have a very strongly guided program, we thought. So we went to NIH, the National Institute of Health, first, and they were extremely receptive.
Okay.
And they said, okay, we're going to put out an RFP. You apply. You put your hat in the ring. If you're successful, we'll start the program. So we were successful.
Okay.
we displaced an incumbent, very good incumbent, I have to say. But, what that led to was a journey to recognize three fundamental things. One is, it's not just the science. That's the most important revelation for anyone, right?
Yeah.
It's not just the science. It's not going to get you very far at all.
Right.
It gets you in the door, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Number two, each person, each entrepreneur, each inventor, each dreamer is unique. They have their own beginning, middle, and end in their minds. They've got their own journeys to go through. You've got to have a program that recognizes that. That's number two. And number three, it's not about just the journey. It's about the outcomes. It's about where you're going to end up.
100%.
Why, and because in that journey towards those outcomes, you may have several pivots. And being open and available to those pivots is incredibly important. But so those are the three principles. But we also recognize if you're going to be customizing something, for each person, if you're going to have science as your principal driver, if you're going to have outcomes as a major consequence of what you're doing, you've got to have an infrastructure of support. So we started to recruit, people who were both pretty savvy with the science, but just as important, pretty savvy with the business of the science.
Okay, sure.
And how you navigate things. And that has been the journey we've taken for 30 years. It's, principal advisors, as we call them, people who would actually be one-on-one with the companies under our aegis. And the program was dependent on, and I told you about the three principles, again, three things. One, mass customization.
Okay, yep.
You have to customize it for a large number of people and scale it appropriately. Number two, it has to be very clearly able to have a network around it, a network effect, because networks is what does this. Introducing networks to people who have no clue on how and what they've just trapped in their little dream bubble.
Sure.
You've got to explode them out there into a network. And number three, you have to be constantly driving towards the development of their enterprise. They cannot just be fly-by-nighters. They've got to be in there for the long haul. And, the biggest problem for us was to tear them away from being grant oriented, just being in the SBI program. There's
only focused on that.
There's a number of companies who do that and do that very well, and they've become very rich doing it. Right. And they've become, I don't want to use that word because it's a pejorative word, but they were called by many people mills, grant mills. I don't like that. Because, the Department of Defense, for example, they really want those people because they're able to iterate, reiterate, reiterate, etc. And then they end up getting a much more refined product than they would otherwise do. So they add their uses.
Yeah.
But, so we started with NIH on these principles, on these points that I just mentioned to you.
And this, for time context in this...
2003.
Okay, so that's what I was guessing, because about 10 years after the initial, right? And
Yes.
So about 2003. So now about 23 years ago, we're now at the nascent steps of like, okay, we're going to LARTA Institute out there into the world with a defined purpose, with a supportive federal partner in the NIH to start. And this is what we think we're going to build based on these core principles that you brought to the table and the other people that were around you.
Yeah, I have to tell you, Rob, very few people get this the way you have. And the way you fed it back to me. I mean, my God.
I'm trying to be a good podcast host.
I'm just like really taken with this, okay? So then we took the same thing, the same basic persona, the same basic kind of model. We took it to NSF, the National Science Foundation.
Okay.
One of the biggest, most wonderful organizations in the world, okay? Because it cuts across all of the sciences.
Yeah.
It's also very invested in the universities.
And for anybody that's joining our show in 2026 and literally just dropped onto Earth in the last couple of years, you might not have ever heard of any of these organizations.
Correct. You may not have ever heard
because our federal government has defunded all all of them probably currently, right? So those are my words, not yours. I have host privilege to pick on who I want to pick on.
Yeah,
I say that again also to illustrate and amplify the value of what you're talking about. That not that long ago, in the last 25 years, there were organizations inside of our federal government, inside of our national institution, that their whole purpose was to actively engage on a localized basis with organizations and people like you to facilitate the very thing that ultimately winds up making us, ironically, the country that then we can tell the rest of the world is so amazing. Right?
Correct.
So,
one of the greatest myths that have come out of it, and we'll talk more about this, obviously, is that, just leave it to the markets. They'll take care of it, That is not what happens, by the way. I know this. I mean, we've worked with 7,200 companies.
Yeah. Okay. Very little of our American bootstrapped origin story does not involve the federal government somehow subsidizing it. Very little of
it. They are the risk takers, the first risk takers.
Yep.
By the time it gets to, let's say, a venture capitalist, it's pretty well vetted by then anyway. And our entire purpose was we need to explode out these companies into this network, make them available, advocate on their behalf, be realistic about their prospects, be very harsh about whether, in fact, the approach they're taking to a particular form of capital or otherwise will work.
Well, and ironically, what you were doing is, as we talk about this private markets, public market thing, is literally you were doing the work of the private markets in advance on their behalf. Like you were you're de-risking.
That's exactly what was going on.
My words, you're de-risking some of the most important progress that is available to be made, right? Or else they wouldn't even want to touch it, right?
They would never want to touch it.
They, the private markets in this day, require a layer like yours in concert with the federal government being the first investor.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, we're so blessed to have had the participation of so many of those folks because we had these concentric circles. So we had, as I said to you, LARTA itself and its fundamental organizational infrastructure. We had the principal advisors around that, the next concentric circle, who work one-on-one with the companies. Beyond that, you had experts that we would pull on from occasionally for very specific things that they could potentially provide to the companies.
Sure.
And then behind that was a network of buyers, companies, investors, foundations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the concentric circles that we focused on, right?
And neither the private capital market nor the government by themselves have any interest in or any skill in building what you just described.
And then, by the way, Rob, to that point that you just made, I have to tell you, the agencies themselves treated this program like a stepchild. Because their whole thing was about research. The amount of money involved was minuscule for them. It was about 2 to 3% of their research budget. So it was considerable. I mean, certainly in terms of global standing, no country in the world has this kind of attention and money paid. $4 billion every year goes towards this program, right? It's a pretty significant amount. So we did NSF, then we did USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, similar kind of posture. And then, by the way, for NSF, just to be clear, because if somebody's listening to this program, they need to be getting the facts. For NSF, it was only phase 1 that we did this, okay?
Gotcha. Yep.
We prepared them for their phase 2. USDA was both phase 1 and phase 2. Then we went to NIST, same thing, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, very, very science-driven, measurements, test equipment, etc. Then we went to NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, had the same success with them. And finally, the big one, as big as NIH on the one side, but at the back end of our journey was the Department of Energy.
Wow. Okay.
So now we're sitting with this incredible understanding of the pathways of science and the ability for it to be able to really influence us. Not just in verbal terms, because everybody will tell you science is so great, they do wonderful things, but really specifically applicable to communities.
Yes.
And so
scalable, repeatable use cases and models to say, we believe in science and here's where we believe in it and how.
Exactly.
And here's what we'd like to see it produce for us.
Exactly. And by the time this became a kind of article of faith for the federal government, about 2013 or 14, I was asked by the then Secretary of Commerce to join a group called the National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Big name.
Yeah.
The moment I got there, she said to me, this is Penny Pritzker at the time, she said, we've got this great, wonderful asset called the SBI program. And yes, commercialization, as you guys have shown, is an incredibly important part of it. But how would we make it more directed? Because everything in the federal government is directed, right? So that it becomes a compulsion that we have to do this. So I came up with a couple of my colleagues, a little white paper on what became known as the Technical Assistance and Business Assistance Fund. The federal government would set aside a fund specifically to not just encourage, because the agencies were not, you didn't have to do this as part of your grant. You just were required to sort of provide some statements on this and so on. But this was a directed effort. You would have to get this money if you got a grant, but you've got to have to show what you're going to be doing and how it's going to advance your commercial prospects. And when I say commercial, I don't mean just for money, but bringing it into use. Yeah. Very important. So, that opened the floodgates. We're not a lobbying organization. So I went to Congress. I testified on behalf of this program in Congress. And then we stepped away. And by the time we got back, a year later, the sausage had been made. And the sausage was unrecognizable. What they were doing essentially was saying, we're going to open it up to anyone.
Oh, goodness.
To tap into that money. No guidance necessary. And that started us down a path, which is unfortunately where we are right now, all these years later. So that now, if effectively, a company can choose anyone, their uncle, their dentist, a dog catcher in that town, and say, he's going to be part of my commercialization routine. And it would work. So in a sense, I'm a little concerned about this, obviously. But what we did organizationally, while these things were happening, we decided, you know what? Our hometown, which we've spent so much time away from, in a sense, requires this kind of learning, this kind of understanding, this view of the world. It needs it very much so. It's a pioneering place. It's full of entrepreneurial zeal and energy. It's got these points of disconnection and fragmentation, and we should be engaged in doing this. So we thought, okay, let's look at what we've done here, and let's look at what we've thought about. We've thought about, feeding the world, USDA, and our whole infrastructure that we developed there. We've talked about fueling the world because, energy and that entire infrastructure that we developed for that particular program that was very, very big. And we talked about healing the world with NIH and all that infrastructure and that remarkable ecosystem that we developed. And that became our mantra.
And it is a beautiful one at that, I will just tell you.
But Rob,
from a storyteller standpoint, right? I mean, the simplicity of feed, fuel, and heal, I mean, wow. Yet it is in practicality, as you've described now beautifully, it is wide-ranging.
It is very wide-ranging. And so we thought, we have to discipline ourselves. So we can't just be all things to all people. We've got to be very clear. I don't like the word accelerator because it's misused and commonly used. We're not common, and I refuse to be common, right? So we said, okay, we're going to have these cohort-based programs with a very specific intention. And that is, they didn't necessarily have to become multi-million-dollar companies, but they had to address issues that we are facing here in LA. The first one was called Heal.LA, which was about healthcare. And we futzed around with it and we thought, we have to be able to make sure these companies survive and everything else. So we took some raw startups, frankly. But we quickly realized within the couple, 3 years that, if you really want to make a difference and you want people to recognize this and you want the public sector to be able to see its importance and you want the private markets to be able to appreciate that you're vetting and de-risking and de-risking and de-risking and you're demonstrating customer adoption, the best place to start it in is in communities.
Right.
If they can work there, you can then scale beyond that. And so we thought about, the various focus areas, and we moved around a few of them. But the three we've ended up with are all things that are affecting our populations.
Okay.
I told you that the LA is the gene pool of the world. It's clear.
Urban lab, your phrase from the beginning.
We've got more, Koreans and Armenians and Cambodians and Thai and Vietnamese and Hmong and Chinese than any other place on earth outside their home countries, right?
Exactly, yes.
So, and everybody talks about precision medicine and how we're going to be personalized medicine. Well, you've got a whole community of folks here that you can find out everything about that genotype.
Yeah, without having to get on a plane and spend 30 hours going across the world. So to work in less than idealistic lab conditions, maybe.
Exactly. That's the journey we want. So maternal and infant health, chronic diseases, because that is a big issue, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But and mental and cognitive health, all issues that affect our populations directly.
Huge.
And so, from a mission perspective, we thought, this is such a rich area in terms of research and in terms of resources and in terms of advantages we've had over a long period of time. We've got UCLA and USC and Caltech and HMRI and Doheny Eye Institute and UCI and UCR, and remarkable institutions that get a lot of public money for research, have shown a tremendous eminence in the field. But how many of those are actually affecting the lives of our people here? Right.
So it's that fine. It's funny. It's that fine distinction between, and we'll use some of the out of date language, right? That accelerator approach that says, yes, like Heal LA. Okay, great. We're going to foster the development of these handfuls of early stage companies that are focused on health sciences. But the truth is, 8 out of 10 of them may find their ultimate market in the federal government or in Chicago or in Norway or something. And then basically all we did was we plucked like 22 people out of the massiveness of Los Angeles.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products.
whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io. Los Angeles, and then we seeded them out to the world.
That's exactly right.
And so you flipped the script and you said, wait a minute, what if we want those same types of outcomes, and therefore we want those same types of innovators, we want those same types of researchers and scientists, et cetera, but we literally don't want to just seed them out to the world to get invested in elsewhere and grow elsewhere. We want to help them figure out how to find their market fit, right? How to find their purpose, how to find their impact, how to find their real productization here.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? And then they may grow from here.
Absolutely.
If they figure out how to solve a unique genetic challenge that exists inside the Korean population, they're going to figure that out here. They're going to benefit the 500,000 Koreans that live in LA. And then, yes, they can also expand and use LA and they do a deal with the South Korean government. But they don't just skip ahead to do the deal with the South Korean government. Yeah. And then LA is left here waiting for the rest of the world to come back to us.
And we felt that
that's fascinating.
This was LA's calling to the world, right? I mean, everybody knows LA. They have different ways of describing it because, again, it's like the blind man and the elephant. We wanted to make it very purposeful, right? So I'll give you an example of a company. I said I was going to talk about this, but there's a company, it's no longer around. I mean, unfortunately, but I mean, some of the learnings they've left behind are remarkable. It's a small company that was initially started by a Taiwanese immigrant, here in LA. And what they discovered they knew this is known, right? African Americans and Latinos lack the biomarker for pancreatic cancer.
Oh, wow. I did not. My dad died of pancreatic cancer. And I did not know that.
And one of the reasons why it's such a deadly disease is because it's always discovered rather late, right?
Yeah, literally. My dad died 6 weeks after his diagnosis.
It's terrible. It's really terrible. So, but diagnosis is important. And if you have the biomarker, it'll show up. Right? It'll show up. They don't have that biomarker.
Wow.
So what this company did was they developed what they called a proxy biomarker that would be a signal in any case to any diagnosis.
Okay.
To say that's pancreatic insufficiency. Remarkable, right? And we wanted to try it out here. The company didn't succeed, obviously. They failed for other reasons.
Sure.
But it's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. It's the kind of issue. Ovarian cancer is another one, very difficult to diagnose early. And yet, that's where we're going. That's why it's female and maternal health, maternal and infant health is one of the areas that we have. Chronic disease. I mean, African Americans, Latinos, big part of our populations here, right? Suffering. Can you believe that in this day and age, tuberculosis is making a comeback?
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. So, all of these things are happening. We've got, cardiovascular issues. They both have remarkable predisposition to cardiovascular issues. Lifestyle is part of it. Yes, we know this, but there's a whole range of things that we could be doing as part of this community. So I've been working with the county's Department of Public Health, UCLA, USC, and starting to engineer these ways of being able to work with local populations.
All right, let me ask you this, because this is a perfect segue to something I was curious about, right? So you, in my sense, now it's been completely validated, like not you, the individual, you, the proxy, the organization, right? You bridge this gap between public research and federal agencies and like public, cutthroat commercial markets and public markets. And you're talking with researchers and academicians and investors and government leaders, electeds, et cetera. What is it when you encounter, whether it be one point problem that you're trying to point a solution towards, or in the more macro, what is it about what you see, and again, I'm not assigning this all to you individually. Obviously, we're all aware, everybody that's listening, there is a team of other smart people, and there is a network of incredibly gifted people around you. But you're the person we're talking to today, so I'm going to say you, right? So, what is it that when you see the way you see it, the way that your lens looks at these complex systems and problems in our societies? What are you seeing as LARTA that the county elected official isn't seeing, or that the corporate executive is only seeing from? Is it simply, and these are my words, like, is it simply that they are all so immersed in and meshed in their own narrow institutional view that they don't see the whole? And you guys are sitting outside, you're going like, our whole job is waking up every morning and seeing the whole. That's it. That is the fundamental disconnect.
You have said it. You have put your finger on the specific value proposition here, right?
Okay.
We understand that this is not linear. Most of those folks in their world is linear, frankly.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
They all have their own incentives.
Yeah. We're connecting the dots to a large extent. One of the early logos that we had was, by the way, the whole puzzle thing, the 9 dots and 3 lines, and how do you get outside the box, right? And you can only get outside the box in a particular way. So it's been our kind of calling. We understand. We've struggled through a lot, Rob. Last year, when the federal government's funding with Doge and everything else came down, we lost an enormous amount. It was taken off our balance sheet overnight.
Yes, because I'm sure you were operating fraudulently and inefficiently.
And so we've had to now pivot again and again, but we had a basis on which to pivot, which is what we've been talking about. I didn't even bring up the issue of what happened on the science side and the funding side. You brought it up early on, but that has been an even greater motivator for us to say, you know what? Let's not get so immersed in the public sector's support of this. There's a whole ecosystem here that we've got to cultivate.
So wait, hold on. Let's see if my memory serves me. So the guy who introduced himself to us by saying that maybe the single most important thing that we all need to focus our entrepreneurial thinking on as a world is resilience, is now articulating to me how his own organization, which is 30 years in the making, is having to figure out how to be more resilient so that LARTA can outlast this current set of political uncertainties.
How could we not? How can I go around talking about resilience if you haven't yourself lived the whole pain and pleasure of resilience?
Yeah. Right? I mean, the alternative choice would be, right, the more typical kind of institutional reaction, like, oh, woe is us. Like we're just the regional nonprofit or foundation. They took away all our resources. So I guess we're out of business.
There's a very big issue here, Rob, which I hope we can get to it, which is, because of the issue of resilience and because of these incredible challenges we face, we don't face them only in Los Angeles. It's a global issue, right?
Right.
So 100%. Since 1997, LARTA has been engaged globally. We started with the Swedes and the Finns in Northern Europe. We went across 21 countries in that time, working with them to try and uncover their entrepreneurial ecosystems, gear them up to be able to compete. Obviously, the one big calling card we had was California. Everybody wanted to be here, so we would have programs like that that were focused on making those entrepreneurs available to our ecosystem here. They all wanted to be here.
Of course.
So we would do soft landings, etc. That has gone now even further, given the challenge and the scope of the challenge we have. We're now talking to Europe, Asia, and a whole bunch of other folks in developing what we call a global bridge across continents, right?
Okay.
To be able to work on these issues and these problems, they can do so locally, but they do so in conjunction with us.
Right.
They come here. They bring their extraordinary talent here. We're we're a world-class city. We should be doing more of that. And frankly, that's, I think, what has kept us going and
Yeah.
pivoting towards.
Good for
It's the
you.
world now with Los Angeles at its center.
Yes, you have to. And I mean, the good news for the pragmatic optimists in the room, right? The good news is that this current federal administration inside the United States will pass, and its leaders will literally pass, and we will get back to a day. There's no going back to what it was.
No, there is no going back, Rob.
But that's okay, right? Like there is no like, oh, we're just going to no. We're going to be different and better. And what you just described as this global bridge, to me, just reeks of what a massive accelerant that will be when then the rest of like the older systems of funding and finance and support from the government does come back in some form and fashion, because you will have essentially built the fire resistant system during a period of intensive fire. And then when the fire's gone, you're going to find out how much more that system is capable of.
Again, resilience.
Yeah.
And here's the opposite. So, we're being very careful. I mean, obviously money is important. The bottom line is important and is always going to be important, but you also have to recognize, that you can't take all comers, right? You got to be very careful.
Right.
You got to be able to see, are these people serious? Is there something there that would enable them to be part of a kind of partnership that's global? And so LATA becomes a centerpiece of that conversation globally. So we're working with Europe.
Yeah.
We're working with Asia. And when I'm talking about Asia, I'm talking about Taiwan. Again, has its own motivations for doing so. They're on a knife's edge. Korea, Japan, right? Working together, those three countries working together with us for a sort of LATA Asia kind of thing. And then in Europe, we've got a few incredibly motivated countries that are focused on these issues, right? Of weather and climate and energy. And, look at what Europe is going through right now with the heat.
Right. Next, literally this week, as we're recording this. Yeah.
And there's so many innovative solutions. I'll give you one of them, and you tell me what you think.
Yes.
As a company that was, there's a second group that we have, apart from the healthcare, called the Venture Fellows, and it's about sustainability. It's food, energy, water. Okay,
through a sustainable lens. Yeah.
Yes,
gotcha.
Entirely sustainable lens. One of the companies that we had is called Aquaria. Again, two immigrant brothers started a company. It's partially based on biomimicry, because I remember way back in our time, we had a company that was working on capturing water from the air.
Mm-hmm.
You know who does that? The Namib beetle in the Namibian desert, the driest place on earth. They
makes
pull
sense.
water in, they carry it on their backs into their dens, and then they just deposit the water there and store it.
Like literal survival instinct.
Yeah. So this company called Aquaria was doing the same thing.
Okay.
Was pulling water out of the air, condensing it, and then building a whole supply of water.
Yeah.
We gave them a chance to be able to pilot it in a school here of an underserved population.
Yeah.
It did remarkably well. It was also an education point for the kids.
Sure.
They went from that to pushing it out into the Sonoran Desert, which is desperately short of water. Mexico City, they were trucking in water from everywhere, as opposed to having these condensation units that this company was able to build in Hawaii as well. And now they're on their way. They have their operation in Texas. It's fine, but they've built an incredibly wonderful, resilient system for the capturing of water, our most precious commodity.
Carbon capture for H2O.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's amazing.
It's just an amazing story. We've got other little things like, a shade covering that came out of research done in UCLA. Remarkable female founder who's just so driven. And it reduces the temperature by an enormous amount.
Sure.
But try and get this into channels like the Olympics, which are going to be
right.
It's become
in a town desperate for shade structure.
Yeah.
Either man-made or nature-made.
Or nature-made. Right?
We need both. We need her shade structures, and we need like a million trees.
But just because of the silo issue, again, it's hard. You have LA28, this remarkable set of people that are in our building, actually. And in order to be able to get any kind of reaction on these kinds of entrepreneurial solutions, you got to go through a process that has become highly bureaucratized or highly engaged with money.
Yeah.
And it has to be simpler. There has to be a simpler way of doing it. So you know what? Let's not depend on these large public infrastructures.
Yeah.
Depend on, much more on the sort of grassroots entrepreneurial ways of thinking about this stuff. Right?
So even the nonprofit institutes of the world are finding themselves facing that challenge of how do we become more nimble and more flexible and more localized in our relationships, and less of like being the little, to use your elephant reference we've used a few times, right? To being like the tick on the elephant's butt, right? And the elephant is the federal or state government, and we just wait around for them to rain some funding down on us, and then we existed, and we say we're doing good, and they're happy because we say we're doing good, and then they can say their money is doing. So you're now this third layer of institutionality that has to exist in our society.
It's what I call the missing middle. It's
Thank you. Okay, that's better. Thank you. That's a better description than mine. So the missing middle, which is historically, again, is finding its way to say, how do we kind of deinstitutionalize ourselves and make ourselves more entrepreneurial?
Correct.
And then go out and find others like us in our own backyard or around the world, and then
around the world
build our own network and community of those like-minded people.
And you know what? I'll tell you, Rob,
amazing.
The way to think about this is, it is effectively, and every entrepreneur should know this, it is a body contact sport.
Yeah,
you got to be in there fully, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. It's a wrestling thing all the time. You're wrestling with these issues.
Yeah.
You're developing new ways of thinking about them, of dealing with them. That's the only way to work.
Yeah.
You can't just be locked into a structure and think that that's going to be your ticket. It's not. You're constantly having to evolve. And if you're going to evolve, you have to be attentive to what is going on around you.
Yeah. And if no one in your community or your network or your universe or your support organizations is teaching you that, and not teaching in the classroom sense, right? But teaching you that through reinforcement, through example, through constant conversation, through activities, like, then you don't know that. Right.
That's exactly right.
And in that space, just in my own, and I'm a novice from the outside world when looking in at the world that you play in, but like just from my own experiences entrepreneurial over the last 30 years and crossing paths with enough back before I was an entrepreneur, when I was in the sales world and I sold into enterprise spaces and the government, like you run into the science people, like the innovator types, right? The mad scientists from the university. Those people don't tend to have those full body contact, human relationship types of skills, right?
Yeah.
And so we would let that fail almost naturally as a society, and then just kind of be like, well, that kind of innovation doesn't produce many outcomes. Instead of, as you've done yourselves, inserted this middle layer into it, the missing middle, as you beautifully say, and say like, hey, we're going to help teach these people how to not only be who they are with all their magical scientific big brains, but also to like think about this as, when we say the word commercialization, it doesn't have to be a bad word. It doesn't only mean get rich and become an oligarch. Like it can mean, it can mean scale. And you know what scale means? Your solution in the mouths and hands of more poor people who need your solution in different parts of our city or our country.
Don't you think that they would be motivated by that, no matter how mad they are, no matter how scientific they are?
But like, if not enough people are slowing down to explain that to them, then they're not they're not looking for it. All right. I want to ask, there's a handful of other things I want us to talk about, but one of these I want to kind of baseline, and this is just a personal curiosity. So I'm selfishly taking advantage of you being here to help us understand this a little bit. In my research for preparing for this conversation, and just kind of in my general California-phile life that I live, I came to discover that the state of California, the great republic which we live in, right, in and of itself, on a nation level, is currently accounting for 18% of the world's R&D.
Correct.
And the countries that have more R&D invested or expenditures than us are like literally, it's like China, Germany, and the US as a whole or something, right? Yeah. I mean, so just the state is that. What I'm curious about, you've already alluded to looking backward, kind of the history lesson of we were big in defense, we were huge in defense, like globally dominant. We were big in like some areas of health science and life sciences and stuff like that. but maybe never kind of at full scale. So that's kind of what we've been doing for the last 30 years. And it sounds like tinkering around in lots of other industries, but maybe never really centering them here. Help someone who's listening to this look ahead beyond your and my lifetime. What are the areas that we're going to be focusing on? Where is that R&D investment? Maybe I'm not even going to ask you where it will go. Talk to me more about where you think it should go here in the state of California. Where is that 18 or probably over the next 50 to 75 years? It'll be 35% of the world's R&D will be happening in California. Where should that R&D spending be spent? Or where will it be if I'm a kid who's going to college?
Yeah, you're going to get this answer. You're going to get an answer to this from a particular group. Most people around are both terrified and motivated by AI. And so you're going to say, AI is the dream.
But you know what? That's why I'm asking you, because I want the real answer.
We've been through this before. We had the dot-com crisis where everybody was buying the dog food.
Yep.
Right? Because that was a big saying at the time. Will the dogs eat the dog food? You had that. You had the energy thing and the clean tech bubble. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to predict anything. I'm not going to prognosticate.
That's what I'm saying.
Enormous amount of extraordinary and mindless hype.
Yes.
And it's become circuitous now and circular in this sense. Companies will actually buy stakes in each other in order to be able to further their own selling of a particular thing to that original company. So they invest in that.
The oldest trick in the book, the Silicon Valley circular economy.
Yeah.
I make CRM solutions to sell to software companies that need to manage their sales process better. Right.
And it's you might as well be standing on the corner of 42nd Street in New York with, a bunch of wallets on the one side and a bunch of rings on the other side and go like this, and that's what they're doing. And, you will get that from a lot of people. Oh, that's where it's going to go because we're terrified of what's I think that where this needs to go is to look at the spaces between the sectors, between the sciences. For example, that the big issue with oil production is what happens when a well dies. I'm just giving you one example here. What happens when a well dies, right? I mean, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
They just leave it there and walk on, and they cover it up, and that's it. Well, Schlumberger in France discovered that the use of microbes that came from a completely different discipline called biology were able to clean up these things very effectively. But it's not the kind of thing you'd find as part of the overall learnings of the oil industry. I'm just giving you one simple example. It's a very straightforward, simple example. There are tons like that. So interstitial research, intersectoral research, if we started to emphasize those, you would find intersecting innovations that you currently do not have because you started this podcast with that. Everything is silo-wise.
Yeah. And to your point, here's a localization example of that. Many people wouldn't know this. We are literally here. You're in the West Side. I'm in Hollywood. We're sitting atop the world's still largest urban oil field.
I know.
And it is mostly dying / being exhausted. And there will be mostly left with the remnants of just cover the hole and leave the thing.
Correct.
And what's going to happen with that? And now you're saying that there are innovations happening inside that industry trying to figure out how to solve that. But then also equally, like Saudi Arabia is going to run dry at some point, right? And while they're busily trying to become some next version of their economy, there will be people who will be charged with figuring out what to do with the environmental leftovers.
Yeah. And you know what? There's already some really interesting...
And these are biological solutions that no one would have thought about.
And there's some really interesting things happening on the circular economy side. Right? So you've got things like, for example, the processing of waste to create a cleaner fuel, a renewable, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's not even go into the assault on renewables that has happened in this country. I mean, there's a natural tendency, of course, to be able to react to that, and I don't want to react to that because it's happening here anyway. A little community in the Central Valley, right? A little community in the Central Valley, poor as anything, in Fresno, actually. And this little city and they've got a bunch of farms, and they've got a bunch of retailers like Walmart, which is always in every community, regardless of its economic strength. And they've got, they've got a bunch of waste, and they've got a bunch of transportation issues because the distances are pretty wild and huge. So what do? So we help them come up with a concept of taking that waste, putting it through a digestive process, creating a fuel at the back end, a renewable fuel that could be used to be able to power their buses, that were taking the produce to Walmart and so on. And then, the whole thing was a continuing circle. And DOE gave them a grant.
Okay.
But it was stopped. It was stalled when the whole thing happened. Yes. And it's back now, and they're starting to put it into effect. So you've got these warehouse folks.
Because even the Republicans have realized that innovation is good for their local economies.
It's good for the local economies, right? And this is a conservative area, by the way, and so on and so forth. But they saw the benefits of this, and they're working in it. These are the kinds of interstitial things that I think are really
I love
important.
that.
There's another lovely company in the Central Valley, another lovely company called Mango Materials that is developing from methane, which is a deadly gas, as you know, with a particularly nasty 10-year half-life, using methane to develop bioplastics that are effectively compostable, that do degrade, that do not affect the environment with these tiny little balls of plastic running around in our oceans.
Right.
This is the kind of stuff that I think we need to spend more time on cultivating in California. Because California, I know, I'm going to say, Jerry Brown started this whole thing. He got known as Governor Moonbeam. But look what he did. He gave the world the catalytic converter.
Hey, I mean, I'm going to again, personal politics aside from what people listening may think, don't think, whatever. I'm riding with our current governor's phraseology that he loves to use, that we're the preview of coming attractions. We're where it starts and where, whether you like it or not. And by the way, I always like to hedge that by reminding people that also means we're literally the preview of coming attractions, and not all the coming attractions are great.
No, they're not.
So that is the totality of our opportunity. Is that, yes, we are always the front edge of the ways that things could be better, but we are also the ones that face the problems that society will face at large first.
And
right? And that gives to your point and to the large opportunity, then that gives us a unique both burden and opportunity to invent the future.
But here. Rob, the old saying, right? Every adversity has a treasured opportunity.
Oh, 100%.
The treasured opportunity we have is the adversity we're facing.
Yep.
Whether it is national, whether it is local, whether it is man-made or nature-made, has an opportunity. If we'd only be able to see between the spaces.
No, I love that. The interstitial spaces in between.
Yeah.
And then tying that, I mean, that's it's not only a beautiful vision for an innovative future, but it's also a practical one, which I love, right?
Yes.
So I call that pragmatic optimism, right?
Yeah.
Where we are both deeply aware of the conditions on the ground around us while also leaning into the possible.
Yes,
right?
correct.
That's my definition of pragmatic optimism, and that's essentially what you just described, which I love.
And we need to be able to have more of that, Rob. And get the story out to the people of California. Not as if we're doing Oracle,
No,
but just getting
practical,
getting them engaged. Yes. I mean, people, you got to see this. I know
if we have a problem here, and we have some very specific ones that are at scale, because everything we do here is at scale in our lives. That problem is already or will soon present itself in Topeka,
exactly,
and in Peoria, and it'll be at a different scale, of course. Right.
Exactly.
But if it happens here, it will happen there. And so you can either play the antithetical, antagonist to our protagonist, and you can try and retard us from figuring out the solutions to your eventual problems before they become your problems. Or you can help us to figure out the solutions here. And it's sounding like I'm learning today, which is so incredible. like, and so encouraging for me, like this idea that LARTA sees itself as that. And again, as a manifestation of many of your own experiential visions and your own particular points of view that now have been surrounded by others who share these views. But like LARTA is acting as this lightning rod to help co-create that kind of future. It's incredible. I want to ask you, we've talked deeply philosophical, a lot of philosophical things. We've also talked a lot of in macro. You did, as I predicted off air before you did answer like 7 of my questions, even though I only asked like 2 of them, which was great. But now I want us to talk a little locally here, because we're both, there's a phrase here in Los Angeles that gets used online. It used to get used a lot more. That was like #LongLA, right? And we're both believers in that philosophy. My personal take on that philosophy is it's for those that are listening that are unfamiliar, it's kind of the equivalency of like a stock market bet. And you're a believer in an asset class, and we want to hold it for long term. Like, so we're very Warren Buffett-ish in our viewpoints about Los Angeles. So I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of our own city, because you've already illustrated how important its success is in a ripple effect for not just the state, but also the country and the world as a whole. So this is an opinion piece for me, but I want to get your feedback. I believe that the city, and we're just going to talk in every way, so we're going to be very macro like we've been all day. Like, I believe that the city's in a tremendous transitional era. Like, I believe 2 things. I believe we're in a transitional stage, literally this particular decade. Some of our own doing, some of our own like lack of momentum, some being done to us, like, reactionary, some just nature, the fires, right? So we're in this transitional era, which I think will wind up being like this decade. But I also think it sets itself up, and I don't think this out of blind hope. I think this because history teaches us this. Like, it then sets itself up for its next great Renaissance era. Right.
That's
and
correct.
For those that don't know, the city has essentially reinvented itself probably 6 or 7, 8 times.
7 times since the last century. Yeah.
Yeah. So like over the last 100 years, basically. Right. So we're about to do that. In your opinion, with all your insights and your perspectives on the ground and also up here, right? Like, what do we need to do better or do well to foster this next Renaissance era more effectively or efficiently?
Okay, so we've got to be able to, first of all, get away from the notion that we are individual jurisdictions here, because this is the only city on earth which has 88 cities in one county,
right,
and 5 counties in one region. None of the inhabitants of the area care much about those jurisdictional pressures. We've got to get away from that, because you know what? I don't like the notion, which used to be around for a long time in the 90s as well. There was a sign on the freeway when you were driving down the 405 that was put out by El Segundo, which said, "You can see the smog from over here."
Oh.
It was a knock at LA.
Ouch.
And this kind of nonsense,
this intermunicipal bickering and bantering and fighting,
highly localized parochialism is not what Los Angeles ought to be. It is the epicenter of so many migrations. And do you think any of those migrants think about themselves in those particular ways unless they're actually given that by public officials? And I'm sorry, but I have to call them out. I have to call them out.
And that's why I asked the question in part. I didn't expect that answer, but that is a hugely insightful answer, because what you're saying is kind of our own municipal structure is inherently holds us back.
It is.
How, without giving away all the answers, like, how do you propose we do that? And or who does that? How do you break down those municipal?
You can start with something that they have done. When we put infrastructure into the city, right, whether it's telecommunications or otherwise, we use something called joint powers, right? The joint powers agreements that were done, JPAs, between cities and so on. We've done that before. We've done it for very specific project purposes. Now you better do it for identity purposes. You've got to be able to craft the new identity that's joint powers. We're all in this together. It's not just an empty slogan. This is an existential issue for all of us.
Right.
I don't care.
There is a legislative tool in our toolbox, you're saying, these joint power authorities that we have historically used for things like telecommunications, or I would bet some joint power authorities were used to build the subways.
Of course they were. Of course they were. And
in
look what
municipalities that you're sitting in right now,
Yeah.
on the subway that you started in downtown LA when you took it home today.
Yeah, look what happened. I mean,
Right,
for 20 years, the subway didn't go anywhere. It was a subway to nowhere, practically. Why? Because of one city, Beverly Hills.
Yes.
That's
Okay, so is there a case, and I'm not putting this on the feet of LARTA by itself, but like the LARTA example, right? Is there a case that this middle layer, this missing middle piece of this discussion now could be these private public partnership organizations?
I think so, Rob.
Right? Because it almost seems impossible to ask any one politician to act against their own self-interests.
You can. And what happens is the only way they know how to express their influence and their interests is by catering to the kinds of specific groups, identitarian groups. And I don't mean to sound like this kind of, a heartless person who has this kind of right-wing attitude. No. Identitarian politics has a place, but the point is, when you have people that are suffering common problems, right?
Exactly.
I don't care whether you're in Bel Air or whether you're in Paramount, right?
Yeah, if you're in Culver City on one, and you're suddenly a Culver Cityan instead of a Los Angelino, like that's irrelevant to the common problem.
Completely. To the inhabitants that they want to be able to come up with solutions, and you can play the identity card, and you can start to appeal to narrower groups, and it doesn't work.
I'm sorry. So I don't want to lay this answer solely on politics, right? Because that's only a part of the solution. And as you say, I think there's this room for this middle layer of institutions that could come along and kind of unify people. I am curious though, because we did allude to kind of the multiple layers of municipal structure. Is there maybe like a prominent role for the county as the unifying governing force over all of this, right? Does that in this next era? So it could be a county in combination with
the county is the first among equals, and in that county, the city first among equals as well. But what you need, it's a unifying force. You're absolutely right. It is a unifying force. The point is, they can't start to cater to specific individual things without looking at this whole story and telling the story themselves. They need to be able to share that story with their constituents.
Yep.
And it doesn't always make for great electoral headlines. Right. It doesn't.
And that's part of the problem. And that's why ultimately I think your solution, part of your idea is this idea of organizations that can become unifying organizations.
The private public
come from the private public sector. Yeah. The LARTA equivalency or LARTA. But,
the problem, Rob, though, is, to be absolutely blunt and honest, they're facing extraordinary fiscal headwinds,
Right.
But there again, there's a treasured opportunity in that adversity. They can start to offload some of this stuff and not pretend that they can do it.
Yep.
Because all they end up doing is creating layer after layer after layer, which is antithetical to nimble solution creation.
Yeah.
It is. And every entrepreneur knows that. So this is entrepreneurial thinking, what you talked about earlier. Everyone has to get that. And this is part of what they end up doing. I mean, you had foundations like Cora, the Cora Foundation, which has been around for quite some time. It's been relatively silent more recently. That would essentially become a training ground for the next leaders in our governments, in our politics, and so on and so forth. To impart to them that kind of attitude towards the problems that we face together. Those kinds of things, I think, are incredibly important because they seed those ideas among those kinds of people who are going to be in public service.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's a huge sacrifice to be in public service, especially for people who are working in the county. But the insecurity that they face right now because of fiscal issues and so on and so forth, what we should be doing is encouraging them to actually participate actively in the kind of civic infrastructure that we're talking about here.
Right.
That is, I think, a big deal. It's unfortunate that, organizations tend to get locked into themselves. I have never felt more open and more liberated, especially the back end of my career now, and what do I want to do when I retire? I may not retire at all, but when I do, after a 33-year innings, it's going to be about this issue, very issue, Rob. And I can tell you, I've announced it here for the first time.
There we go.
there you are. You hosted the
There we go. We're breaking news. And all I did was ask my silly questions. That's it, right?
A very seemingly innocent question, but this is extremely important. First of all,
and I'll say this to you in the grander service of this whole conversation, right? Because again, this isn't us narrowly just, extolling our own virtues and talking about our own city in a very narrow way. Like what you just described, a passion for, an obsession with the addressing of this opportunity from a problem that exists is like universally applicable. I mean, so if we're not essentially training the next generation of leaders on how to think, differently about the solutions, I mean, the problems that we have societally are not going to get less complex.
No.
Right? AI is not going to come along and make things less complex. Like the internet didn't make it less complex. Like, so we're inevitably hurtling towards a world that is ever more complex. Complex doesn't always necessarily have to be bad. Like just complex systems, as you would say, right? And therefore the institutions have to be more nimble and flexible. The leaders have to be more creative and entrepreneurial in how they think about this, because the problems are only going to get more complex. And
you know this very well, Rob, because it's part of your entire ethos and enterprise is about storytelling. And I mean, this is a story. And one of the issues that we've really got to be able to ingrain in these people is that there's a difference between an opinion and a fact. Right? We've lived in a fact-free universe for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it has become an infectious point with everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think we've got the obligation here in LA because we've got some remarkable thinkers. We've got some remarkable, as you said, researchers. We've got some remarkable people who actually respond to solutions very well. You can take a look at our impact report. By the way, I'd love for you to do that.
Yeah.
Our 2025 impact report. We'll get to that in a minute. But, so I think it's important to be able to ingrain impress on people certain kinds of baseline principles. But the story of LA in its 8th age or 9th age or 10th age is a story of restless and optimistic evolution,
That's beautiful.
And that is where we're heading. I mean, so, these problems exist. They've become even more so now. I mean, nobody thought about this when they did the GI Bill and you had all these tracts of incredible housing in the San Fernando Valley and the South Bay, that it would require resources that we were running out of, or that we didn't have any way of being able to recreate in some fashion. But you know what? Here we are. Right?
And I mean, it just validates, again, much of what you do within LARTA, within the feed, fuel, and heal ethos that you focus on, right, is this idea, my phrase, like this idea to have an organization, a group of people that can be allowed to or encouraged to like think in 50 to 100 year horizons.
Yes.
Right. Which we're terrible at as Americans, just culturally.
We're really bad. I mean,
20 some odd years ago when I was a younger guy traveling around Southeast Asia, and we were doing a lot of business and work in China, and my Taiwanese/Chinese partner with his Asian or Indian/Japanese business, and we were running around doing this together, and they were 10, 12 years younger than me. So they were in their 20s and I was in my 30s. And they used to say to me all the time, like, Rob, you guys, like, we think in like 3,000 to 5,000 year horizons over here. You guys, he's like, you guys are running around worrying about like next quarter.
I love it.
He's like, the whole structure of the American mindset, from politics to business to everything, is like 90-day windows. He's like, no wonder you don't get enough done that is impactful and like long term. He's
and
like,
you know what, Rob? Taking that point further, you just talked about the 100-year thinking, the 200 to 2,000 year, whatever. Taking that further, what ends up happening is we become extremely dismissive.
Sure.
Of those kinds of cultures that have had that kind of continually evolving.
Oh, yeah. Because
we worship these kinds of short-term things, and it's.
I just turned 58, and at this point in stage of my life, I am most interested in talking to and then learning from the people who will think about what is going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years, because I have a 20-month-old grandson, and I am most interested in, and it sounds counterintuitive to many people, but I'm most interested in the Los Angeles that he will prospectively live in when he's 50 years old. I will be long gone.
Be gone.
Right? But that's okay. That's the way and we need, as you're saying, like, we don't allow enough space in our society for people to be able to have those types of contemplations and discussions inside
or even interactions.
Right. I was going to say even inside their own mind, let alone with other people.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
And I want to take this all back to kind of, as we finish up, I want to pull it all back to something you talked about at the very beginning, right? Like, so you have a phrase that I saw that popped up in some of your different materials, like this idea of deployment through discussion and viability, not just ideation, right? And I think in many ways, although that phraseology probably gets initially born into the world of startups and how do we commercialize a company, and let's not just ideate for ideation's sake, as we talked about in the beginning, but to this latter section here where we're talking about kind of a city or a state or a national ethos, right? Like that kind of ecosystem begs that we have deployment through discussion and that we wind up with viable, and you said this early on, outcomes.
Right? Yeah, you've hit this so
Please.
well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that is problematic in trying to get this through, whether you do it through missing middle or otherwise, is the fact that we have become inured to structures that make that kind of contemplation difficult, if not impossible, right?
Sure.
Whether it is government or whether it is private sector, which normally see each other in adversarial terms, honestly, putting aside everything else.
Yeah.
Or we look at eminence in a particular way and are attracted to it because it's eminent and because it's well known and because we are celebrity obsessed and everything else. And we want to be able to be near people who are powerful and capable of being able to project a certain kind of value. And the problem is obviously that we're rooted and, foundationally we're rooted in those structures, which means we don't get to be able to understand and contemplate and storytell and evolve our thinking towards the kinds of things that you and I have just been spending a whole hour talking about.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping that we can do. It's
a noble aspiration, but also, and I'm going to tie this back to kind of the ground level, like it's also a very practical hope. Right. Because and I'll make this case in Los Angeles, and tell me if you think this is reasonable assertion. Like right now, literally, if from what the people need and what the people want, right? Like you said, like problems don't worry about the district line, right? If I find myself in the politics of our local situation, like trying to encourage local electeds to think innovatively about things which they shouldn't have to think innovatively about, which are literally just delivery outcomes, like replacing streetlights, like repaving potholes. I mean, I had the good fortune to have on my show about a year ago, long before she ever considered becoming a current candidate for mayor in the mayoral election, a certain city council person. And we had a wonderful conversation at which I jokingly teased her and I said, hey, I grew up in Chicago. I'm a child of a political kind of civic service family in Chicago from a long time ago. I said, so I grew up on the ethos that like I've seen mayors get kicked out of office because they didn't get the streets shoveled after a snowstorm. Like, and I said, we have an equivalency to that here. We just have never thought about it before. And I said, so to your point is, I think you can almost marry both. Like we can marry this idea that like, hey, think differently. But the truth is, think differently about just deliver some outcomes.
I know
like
that's what people are looking for.
If we could just deliver some outcomes into the day-to-day lives of people, if you are going to develop drugs that can help diabetics be less diabetic, they're going to be really, really happy, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so if you can deliver on civic services, which again, it's sad that, as you say, the institutional weight of the history has created these like sclerotic organisms.
Like Rob, just to take a very simple, practical example in bettering people's lives. Streetlights. You brought up streetlights, you brought up potholes, right?
Yeah.
I bet you anything that any one of those people currently working in public works or in street lighting, Bureau of Street Lighting, right, have ever even contemplated going outside.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at eSudo. Running any business, but especially a law firm, means balancing a lot. And technology, frankly, shouldn't be a headache. ePseudo makes information technology and cybersecurity simple for law firms large or small. With over 20 years of experience, they specialize in everything from Microsoft 365 management to advanced cybersecurity solutions. They help you to stay ahead of threats, manage your data securely, and keep your tech running smoothly so that you can focus on what matters most, your clients. ePseudo understands the legal industry's unique needs, offering tailored solutions to ensure that your firm is always in compliance and always protected. Are you ready to upgrade your firm's technology or get help with your questions? Visit ePseudo.com.
Outside of the systems that they are already engaged in,
Right.
to look for solutions that are much easier, faster, cheaper to put in place.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, streetlights, for example, the notion of streetlights being networked is something they have never thought about.
Right. Yeah.
And yet it's already out there. We have a company with that. I'm not going to push that.
Yeah.
But we've seen this happen where streetlights are they're networked, but they work autonomously in response to what is going on around them, because this is smart lighting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Smart street lighting. That kind of innovative thinking you cannot have if you're going to be a slave to a structure that says you will do it in this way, that you've layered on top of layer on top of layer for years. Potholes. There was a company years ago, nothing to do with us, that had proposed repaving the street to be both much more reflective of sunlight, so it didn't become as hot, but also therefore not degrade as much by the use of this material that was so remarkably resilient and that would kill any kind of ficus expansion that has destroyed our sidewalks. Santa Monica tried it out as an experiment and it worked. Right? I don't know what they did with it, but it's been proposed to the city of Los Angeles and the county for years. And look, our sidewalks are in a mess.
Right.
Our potholes are not getting any better.
Right.
I mean, just simple things that are out there in material science and in biology and in, getting out of yourselves, and the structures are the worst problem that we have right now. That's the one thing.
I posed a question to someone. I'll remain nameless, but I just simply said, in this one example I was talking about at the time, I said, have we sent anyone or a group of people to Paris to learn how they did that exact thing? I was like, because I don't care if later we do that exact thing. Trust me, everybody's going to be happy, and no one's going to care whether you have to assign the credit for it to the fact that they thought of it in Paris first.
Yeah, you're so right, Rob. I would tell you,
and I don't think we do that.
No, we don't. And you know what? I'll tell you something. You brought up the example of a great place for this particular example to take root. The French, for all of their bureaucracy, and God knows it's legendary, and their structuralist way of thinking, and I speak the language, I'm really sympathetic to them on this, because they're so complex in their thinking, right?
Yep.
They respond to things like this much more clearly and with greater purpose than we do.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be the entrepreneurial thinkers, right?
Yeah, right. Again, the great irony.
We're surrounded by incredible solutions from incredible people who don't know that they're incredible, who are doing it just because they are passionate about it, and we can't even be receptive to them. And that's absurd.
Yeah, no, it is 100%.
That's just absurd.
All right, I'm going to do a twist on the last question because of some things we've talked about already, and I selfishly want to get your kind of insight. So we're going to, instead of just to the average listener, come up with what would be the things they should think about. I want the policymakers, the public servants, the organizational leaders across LA who do listen to this show, because some of them are alumnus of the show, like you're about to become. I want us to talk about that. We have a unique catalyst coming up in front of us, 750 days away, called the Olympics. Right. And it's for setting aside the sporting aspects of it all, which I'm very excited about, all that stuff. It is a unique thing that the Olympics has always been, in no matter where it gets deployed. It is a catalyst for political action or civic progress, infrastructure development. It's a catalyst for all this stuff. Right. And so we have this, and we've been talking about it forever. but I don't think we've really been like using it or tapping into its catalytic nature until maybe we're about to encourage some people. So with 750 days to go, and I'm not telling you to tell the LA 28 people what to do or the city what, just in general terms. If I had to ask you in your worldview, so in Rohit Shukla's worldview of like what we could catalyze in the next 750 days, give me 3 things that would bubble to your mind that would be like, okay, if I were the chief potentate of all of this and I said, we've got 750 days, what are 3 things, areas of our society or infrastructure or culture or health and wellness or whatever? What are the 3 things that you would say like, oh, this is what I would lean on into these 3 areas for the next 150 days so that when this Olympics is finished in August of 2028, we have left a legacy that will serve Los Angeles in these 3 areas for the next 50 to 100 years.
Okay, so first of all, let's learn from 84. I was around at the time. Peter Uberoth was the chair, right? Much simpler structure. He was a businessman. Yes, he was. And he was well regarded and well liked because of his ability to be able to delegate well, but delegate with imagination. What he decided was, you know what? We're not going to build new stadia. We're not going to build new infrastructure. We're going to be, except for the airport, which we needed to do because at the time the airport was several terminals with these big balloon-like hangars between them. And it was awful. And they came up with the 2-tier structure, the departures and arrivals levels and so on and so forth. A beautiful, beautiful terminal they came up with that got named after Tom Bradley. But he said, we have to have an effect after the Olympics because we do not want to have a huge deficit that then we spend the next 10 years trying to live down or spend down. So his thing was he wanted to get people, younger people, especially kids in communities across and around the freeway, the 5, for example, even those people, into sports in a way that would encourage them to do so and have programming at schools and everywhere else. And by the way, that's what they did. Okay. Yeah. It was an incredible legacy. We may have frittered away some of it, but there was an incredible legacy there. 8 years later we had, or was it 8 years? Yeah, 8 years later we had the riots. And then that set us back a little bit.
Yeah.
So I say that only because there was a vision to have an enduring legacy. I don't know that there is one. If there is, I haven't heard it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard it.
Right. I haven't. Certainly heard and again, not saying that there isn't, but we just haven't heard it yet.
But that's part of the problem because if you're going to tell a story to the city which is going to host it and to get people excited about it and not say, I'm going to flee because I can't imagine what would happen with the traffic. You've got to give them a story of hope and not just empty hope, but pragmatic hope. So the first thing I would say is you have to be on the edge because if you're not on the edge, you're taking up space.
Okay.
So what does that mean? It means, number one, doing things that you would not ordinarily do if you were to set up an operation like this, because otherwise you end up going to the same old way of doing things.
Right.
The narrowest possible alternative, the easiest one. Yeah. So to your point earlier, start to engage things and people and infrastructure that you have not, that have been on the outside of what you've been doing.
Okay.
Deliberately go for them.
To the edge.
Because you can introduce some remarkable thinking and then you've got to be committed to using it. This should have been started 3 years ago, but it didn't. So that's okay,
right.
You know?
Yes.
You started now, okay? Now here's the other thing. The second thing I would do. If you're going to show that the Olympics is not just a remarkable sporting event that really celebrates excellence in physical prowess, whether you're a Paralympic athlete or a regular Olympic athlete, you've also got the opportunity of being able to look at the place in which it is happening. In this case, Los Angeles. If we know that Los Angeles has had fires, that it has had extreme weather events, that, by the way, those extreme weather events are being reproduced around the world. Why don't we make this a lab to showcase at the Olympics?
Okay.
Have an international Olympiad of solutions from the rest of the world to LA.
Okay. Wow. Little World's Fair / exposition inside the Olympics.
Inside the Olympics.
I like that.
Have a little Olympiad. Get the fans engaged in that kind of Imagineering.
Yes.
Where they participate in these things being presented from around the world, and you might find some really remarkable things.
Of course.
We get to choose them. You have some kind of a process.
Yeah.
You don't just provide, I'm an eminent judge because I'm now title of a judge of the Olympiad, of the products Olympiad. No, choose ordinary people, bring them in.
Right. That's
Lost
beautiful.
Angelinos who want this stuff to survive.
Exactly.
And then from those solutions, choose ones that would have an enduring legacy for us.
Okay. There you go.
Get corporate, get foundation, get people to put money into this because of the infrastructure that's needed.
Right.
So that's a huge one, and I would
big.
That would be number two. It follows from number one because you've got to get outside your own comfort zone.
Yeah.
And the third thing is, which has not happened, and I know this happened after the riots. There was a remarkable lady who owned engine company number 28, that restaurant in downtown, Linda Griego. Okay. Who did rebuild LA, and that was a remarkable campaign, and it actually worked because it got people moving and it got the bureaucracies talking to each other and so on.
Yeah,
something similar in terms of a campaign for LA, because I thought what we ended up showing at the end of the Paris Olympics as we took the torch was embarrassing.
You mean Tom Cruise in his little motorcycle thing to Griffith Park?
Utterly embarrassing from a city that is so creative, that is so remarkably in everybody's imagination. We could have done a lot better. I mean,
probably 40% of the crew that worked on that filming that day aren't in the industry anymore, because we have ignored the industry for the last 25 years, right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So we could have put forward a better, more complete,
So there's an opportunity now to be able to have this kind of cohesive story about LA that needs to be told to the world. I will tell you, Rob, I mean, I'm out there all the time, all over the bloody place, talking to people across the world. Nobody thinks of LA when they think about innovation, when they think about imagination. Imagination only because, the movies, yes.
Right.
But there is so much more. When I coined the phrase, LA is the gene pool of the world, people were like, whoa. So tell me why that is. What we need to do is foster people's imaginations in ways that they didn't think were associated with the city.
I love that. Okay. No, I love that. Those are three incredibly excellent points. And that's a very tactical, beautiful way for us to wrap this amazing conversation up. I'll selfishly tell you, I'm just going to put this out here on the air because you'll get a kick out of it. And you'll probably agree. So a former guest of ours who is an incredible research analyst, works in kind of market insights, young Mexicano, who I know lives out in the Valley. He and I had an episode in which we talked about LA in advance of the World Cup and 2028. And the analysis, the research that they had done in the market research they've done was amazing. I'll share some of those reports with you. But Mario and I talked about it then. And actually, ironically, we were talking yesterday about this exact thing. I've pitched it to a couple people and I haven't gotten the positive response I want. So I'm going to continue to pitch this idea. I just need to find a sponsor to fund this little endeavor of ours. But I want to create an optimistic, positive, pragmatic, positive podcast about the possibilities in Los Angeles leading up to the Olympics. So
I love it.
It's not just a podcast about I basically I didn't know where you were going to go with that answer, but as you started answering, I'm like,
I love it.
I mean,
think it's such a great thing to be able to do,
because we don't tell the story.
Yeah, make sure you get to the world, Rob.
We don't tell our own story. I know. And I'm not saying I'm the greatest. I'm one of those guys who shows up and goes, well, if no one else is going to do it, then I could surely do it. Right. And so he and I were like, dude, because he did this market research and the insights were incredible. And you're like, his market research validated everything you said about this being the gene pool. It's just from a different point of view. And he was like, I don't understand. Like, why are we not out there every brand in the world should be coming here and setting up remote offices for 2 years beforehand to literally test their brands.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, no one's out there doing it. So I just got to find somebody to underwrite, like that for a couple of years.
My good friend Stephen Chung, who's CEO of LA EDC and president of the World Trade Center Association. There's a lot of information and statistical information and analytical information that he presents on a continuing basis about, the ports and the infrastructure and all of this. These are really worthwhile points to put out there, but they have to be wrapped around with this optimistic, energetic, passionate kind of Imagineering for the world.
No, it's a beautiful way. That's how we're going to end this, because that's really, again, as we talked about at the very beginning, and I'm grateful for your time. You've been so generous. This is our the third longest podcast I've ever done in 216 episodes in 6 years, but it was worth every bit of it. And we could have been like Joe Rogan, and we could have talked for another 6 hours.
Let me just say, I have not been on a single podcast which has been as illuminating, because it brought things out for me, and it would not have come out in the way it did and in the kind of meandering sometimes way that it did if it hadn't been for your ability.
No, I appreciate that.
I really appreciate that.
I'm equally as grateful for you. Thank you for the kind words. So let's do this so that folks that are listening, how can they find or follow the Larta Institute? Like, what's the website? Or how would you like them to contact you if they want to find you on LinkedIn or something?
The website's still in transition, and we've got a new website starting out here. I think the best place to do it also, apart from the website, which is fine, it just needs to be a little bit more, shall we say, imaginative in the ways that I've been talking about this.
Sure.
But there is a impact report that has been released for 2025 that is both looking at what we've done and reflecting on that, but reflecting on where we're going. For example, the impact fund that we just got as a consequence of the generosity of the state.
Yeah. And so if someone goes to the current website address,
then you do www.larta.org//impact.
Okay. Awesome.
And you'll get a copy of the impact report, which I'm really proud of, by the way. It's really not just a chronicle, but it's a roadmap that we're going to be holding on to.
That's what we need. That's what we need. We need the roadmaps. We need to understand, as my dad used to say, you can't figure out where you're going until you understand how you got here.
Exactly.
Right. So we need to understand the history, but we got to have a roadmap for what we're going to do with all those lessons, right?
And I started with that. Right? I started about the origin story, right? So it's being true to that kind of vision, which has evolved and changed, but it's still there. And I think that's what they'll get from our website.
And I know from experience, like, you can also find Larta on LinkedIn. You can find Rohit on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. Yes. And if you're looking for him around LA, just look for Dave Whalen. And wherever Dave Whalen is, Rohit will probably be in the background of the photo. Right. So if you can find Dave Whalen, it's like finding Waldo. If you can find Dave Whalen, then you can most likely find Rohit and Larta. Yeah. Hey, again, sir, absolutely appreciate your time.
I really appreciate it.
Really great. Thank you so much. And as always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show is produced by our team at the Storytellers Company in Mexico City and Los Angeles. And you can always find, follow, subscribe, and share our show as found on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite podcast by searching Entrepreneurial Thinkers with Rob Ryan. You can also follow along on our various social media platforms for clips and contents at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And if you'd like to connect with me, our host, you can find me just about anywhere on social under the handle I am Rob Ryan. Thanks, and have a great day.